A big shout out to the 8th grade ELA team at Heritage for helping with this presentation. Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Castillo, and Ms. Ramirez, and I'm Mr. Gross. Today we are going to be working with onomatopoeia. And I think whenever I do onomatopoeia, I get a few students who roll their eyes and think that this is something that they learned in elementary school and they're never really going to use in real life. But the fact is we use onomatopoeia every single day. And people out there to this day have made millions and millions of dollars through onomatopoeia. And this actually, onomatopoeia comes in historically for thousands and thousands of years. So let's take a look at that. Some of the most obvious examples of onomatopoeia come in popular music. If you're a country music fan, you should know the name John Prine. If you're a country music fan and you don't know John Prine, you should go look up his music. It's fantastic. But in this example, I really want you to pay attention to what John Prine says about onomatopoeia.
55 cents, 65 agents sitting on a fence saying, hey little brother, look what we got for you. We're gonna rope off an area, put on a show from the Canadian border down to Mexico. It might be the most potentially close thing we can possibly do. Yeah, little buddy, gonna get your chance, make a few best law.
It's coming up right here.
Bang with the pistol, crash with the window, ouch with the son of a gun. Onomatopoeia, I don't want to see it, speaking in a foreign tongue.
So we hear him say, bang with a pistol, crash through a window. So we have bang, crash, ouch with the son of a gun. Ouch would be your onomatopoeia word. But what's interesting is when he says onomatopoeia, I don't want to see you speaking with a foreign tongue. And this comes back to where the word comes from. And we'll get to that in a couple of slides. So earlier in this presentation, I said that onomatopoeia has made people millions of dollars. And I think Missy Elliott is a prime example of someone who has used onomatopoeia to totally change a genre. So in the mid-90s, Missy Elliott hit the scene, and through her use of halftime in rap and onomatopoeia, she takes rap and she changes it forever.
It's my window. Beep, beep. Who got the keys to the Jeep? I'm driving to the beach.
So it sounds a little silly, but really this made people take a look at the use of their language and incorporate that into their art form. So Miss Elliott took onomatopoeia and really changed the game. So the big question here is, if onomatopoeia is so prominent in our daily lives and in our culture, why does this word look and sound like nothing else in our language? And really this comes back to the origin of this word. And this can be traced back to the Greek abstract noun onomatopoios, which means literally name maker. So if we look at the two root words here, we have onoma, or sometimes onomat, which means name, and poiein, which means to make. So literally, what we have is a word that makes to make a name. Onoma comes from the word nomen. And we see nomen or onomen. If we trace it through Indo-European language history, we see that initial O fall off sometimes. Sometimes it's back on. And we don't really know why that is, but nomen, onoma, does make it into English as name. So noma or nomen changes to name. And we actually find a lot of variant English words with O-N-Y-M in them. So if we take a look at the word pseudonym, meaning false name, anonymous, meaning nameless, we have synonym, antonym, and a number of others. So the definition of onomatopoeia is the formation of words and imitation of sounds, or very literally, to make a name like the thing itself. So if we take this back to our previous lesson about show, don't tell and using sensory details, we see onomatopoeia being sound words. So this is another really good way to infuse a piece of writing, a poem, a short story, really anything with sensory details. It's a really good way to paint that picture in your reader's mind. So in these before examples, we see a lot of telling sentences. In the after examples, we have a lot of showing sentences where you're really letting the audience hear what's happening in that sentence, in that story. So we're putting the audience in the moment and letting them really know what's going on in our story. So instead of I could hear the car horn from my room, we have honk, honk, honk. I could hear my impatient sister laying on the horn all the way from my room. Instead of Bella walked on the leaf-covered trail back to the campsite, we have the dry leaves crunched and crackled under Bella's feet. She knew everyone at the campsite could hear her coming. So looking at onomatopoeia, we see that this is very connected to human nature. People have this very fundamental quality of being onomatophilic. We love to name things. We have this intense desire to do the first thing, claim the first thing, name this first thing. And this is connected to poetry. We see Charles Clark. He was a cowboy poet, and actually he became the poet laureate of South Dakota. He says, the very idea of what a poem does, of how a poem conveys images, sounds, news from the world through the voice of the poet and into the ears of the listener, is intensely connected with the idea of mimicry. And again, we have this word mimicry. And coming back to Plato, he warns us, and this is actually really interesting, he warns us that poetry actually threatens the state, because in onomatopoeia, through onomatopoeia, the human challenges the divine prerogative to name the first thing. So through onomatopoeia, we actually become creators ourselves of something entirely new. And this was viewed as as something that was very dangerous. And in ancient Greece, you really did not want to be accused of threatening the state, because this is connected to threatening a core belief system and a way of government. And they had a really easy way of dealing with people that threaten their way of government, that threaten their state. They just throw them in jail. But what's interesting is we see onomatopoeia also connected to something that the ancient Greeks held in really high regard, and that is the arts, more specifically poetry. So onomatopoeia gets this pass.